Come on. All right. Hello, hello, hello. I promise to under-deliver today since I'm holding a microphone. It's going to keep me kind of in line. I'm not going to be able to travel much because I'm going to think that I'm tethered down to this, even though it's wireless. Is it working? No. All right, so we're continuing this series on saying yes, and for us in the Manning household, we are in this season of making some huge decisions in our life. A couple weeks ago, I shared with those of you that were here that we had made the decision to permanently take in Charlotte and Josiah, our two foster kiddos that are staying with us. Tragically in January they lost their mom and they have no parents, so they're orphans. And we listened to God, and God said yes. And we said, "Are you sure?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Let me just lay out the red carpet." And it's happened. And so probably finalized in March. But and I might even talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But another big decision going on right now for us is Colby, our 18-year-old. And I asked permission. Colby, you don't even know what I'm going to say. I could just follow it up, is choosing to, I don't know. So Colby's 18 years old. He's a senior in high school, and he's going off to college here real soon. And so he got into the two schools that he wanted to get into, and now he's faced with this decision on what is he going to do? Where is he going to go to school? And we're helping him make that decision. But more importantly than making that decision, which is a huge decision, it's our first time kind of encountering these new things in our life, but even more important than following the decision on what college he's going to go to, the more important thing is making a decision on what is God asking him to do in this season, and how can we support him in what God's leading him into. And so that's kind of some new territory for us. And as one of the scenarios, Colby is thinking that he's going to fly the coop. He's going to go away to college and not live in the house anymore. And for us, that's a crazy idea of one of our children is going to leave home, right? And it caused me to, we'll kind of circle back around on this idea a little bit in the big decisions, but it caused me to think about a story in the Bible that we're going to focus in on today, where another person was asked to leave his home and go off and trust God in it. And for us this morning, I want us to kind of walk away from today with looking at these different ideas of the costs and scenario, the outcome, those things that we maybe don't even always take into consideration. And for us, definitely in our everyday life decisions, but also in what God is asking us to say yes to. Right? Oftentimes we think of when we're making a decision about maybe our finances or about a workplace or about, schooling, all that kind of stuff, we think about, what's the outcome going to be, or what's the cost of said thing we're going to do? Definitely what we're looking at is cost of college. Wow, that's crazy, right? What's the cost of it? And so I think for us this morning, my hope is that we kind of wrestle with this idea of saying yes to God. Do we need to know the cost? Do we get to know the cost? Do we get to know what the outcome is going to be? Should we? Do we feel it's unfair if God doesn't tell us, if I say yes to this, this is the outcome that's going to happen, right? I'm come on. Can I trust you with that, God, right? And do we get to do that? And so as we say yes, we ask ourselves those questions. What is the cost? What is expected of us? What is the outcome? How does this affect our circumstances in life? Because church, today I hope that we get to see, maybe not in the immediate sense, maybe not in the sense that where you're going to leave today and say, well, I'm going to say yes to God, and Pastor Jason said, when I say yes to God, this, that, and the other thing's going to happen, right? This is going to be clear, the path that's going to happen. But I hope that we can see better the idea of God working in our decisions, working in the ability to say yes. And we can look back at the decisions we're making now, the decisions we made maybe a couple years ago or a few years, or we can even look back at decisions we made 10 years ago, but definitely the decisions we start to make when we consider God in those decisions. That we can look back 10 years from now and see the way God had kind of laid the cost and the outcome and just, or maybe didn't, but we said yes then, and this is what was produced. Look at where I'm at now based on those decisions I made and including God in those. Look what God's done over the last 5, 6, 10 years. And it starts with the question as to whether or not we believe, do you believe that God's way, are you more confident in the way God would do it than the way you would do it? Are you more confident in God's ability, even though you don't know what it's going to look like, because oftentimes we try to control when we make the decision. Like in my confidence, man, I'm confident in what I can and can't accomplish because it's on me. But are you more confident in what God can do than what you can orchestrate yourself? Because oftentimes we try to build and control and allow ourselves to depict the route that we're going to go, and then we just hold tight to that, right? Even if it is in opposition of what God has for us. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Genesis chapter 12. If you don't, there's one on your phone. You can download it before I even get to my next main point. YouVersion's a great Bible, but there's a handful of Bibles in the back as well. We're going to spend most of the time in Genesis 12. Genesis 12, mind you, just kind of lay out how Genesis works really quick. I love laying this out because it's super easy. Genesis 1 is creation. God created the heavens and the earth, the light from the dark, and everything that is what is us, this earth. And then Genesis 2, God creates man. And then Genesis 3, man says, I got it from here, right? He's like, I got it. We're like, we got it. We can handle it from here. Thanks God for setting everything up for us. Now we're going to take it. And we have the fall, and we have what then starts the idea of, man, we live in a broken world, and sin entered the world, and because of that, we struggle. We continue to struggle. We continue to make poor decisions and tough decisions. We have Cain and Abel, which is a depiction of that. Then we hit Noah, which is actually a huge yes in the Bible, right? I don't know. We might go Noah at some point and his yes in the Bible. But Noah's descendants populate the earth, and then we hit the call of a guy named Abram. Now, Abram would go on to be known as Abraham, but Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham, and I am one of them, and so are you. Right arm, left arm, right. All right, cool. I didn't even sing that in Sunday school because I didn't even go to Sunday school. I started church at 18, and we didn't sing that in youth group because that was not cool. But somewhere, that song's being sung this morning probably. And so we see Genesis 12. And this is Abraham's call and Abraham's decision. It's funny because I wasn't going to do that, but Sven and I had a chance to connect this week. And I told him I was talking on Abraham, and both of us just broke out and sung. And I was like, all right, I got to do it. So Genesis 12, 1-3 says this. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country, your people and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. And if you heard it like the way I heard it when I was like, man, I heard, I know that there's a yes in there that Abraham says to start the lineage that leads to Jesus, that leads into the disciple. I mean, it's like a crazy lineage that is basically the salvation of this world. And it starts with a yes from Abraham. And I went back and read it, and you might have heard it the way that I heard it. Like, I will make your name great. Through you, I'll make a great nation. You will be blessed. You will be a blessing. You will bless those who bless you. Like, I will bless those who bless you. And you might have read it that way and skipped over the beginning of that. People will know who you are. And you will know people. I mean, that's in essence, like, that's at the core of who we are, the connection that we feel, the connection. I mean, I feel blessed that we are a church that is connected. Like, I come to church and I know you and you know me, and we have this connection, because that's God's design, is for us to connect in that way. And this promise is here, I'm going to make your name great. You're going to know a bunch of people. People are going to know you. There's going to be great purpose and meaning. And honestly, for us, that is at the essence of what we desire. I don't know about you, but it's what we desire in life: purpose and meaning. Greater than myself, right? Greater than what I can accomplish. I want to be a part of something that's great, right? It's the reason why in 1936, Carnegie wrote that book, Winning Friends and Influencing People, and that sold over 30 million copies, right? So the reason why Rick Warren, one of the very first Bible studies Heather and I did in our married life was Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life, right? And that sold, I think it's like over 50 million copies, and I think in somewhere of like 85 different languages, right? And people just grasp a hold of that idea of more purpose and more meaning in my life, and that is what I desire. We all want purpose and meaning and value, and to participate in something, specifically with other people too. And if I can tell you something, it all starts with a yes. And if we're going to boil it down to like who we are as Christ followers, those that are following Christ, it starts not with a yes to a friend, or a yes to somebody in this room with you, or a yes to yourself. It starts with a yes to God. It starts with all right, God, okay, you put it on my heart. I'm going to do this, right? I'm going to step in to this. It starts with the author and the creator of everything, the one that can give you the most purpose and meaning in your life, and it starts with saying yes to him. In Genesis chapter 12 and verse 4, I love the way that it's followed when God says, do this, and this is what's going to come. In the first three words of verse 4, it said, and so Abraham went. And if we look back, and sure, I mean, if God just said, I'm going to make your name great, you're going to know people are going to know you, you're going to have huge influence, I would have been like, yes, I will go. Can I bring my friends, right? But if you skip over the beginning of that, which is the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country, go from your people, leave your father's house, and I will show you the land. He didn't say, this is exactly where I'm going to take you. He said, leave your family, leave your comfort, leave everything that you know. I mean, Abraham was raised, I'm guessing, in his father's household. I mean, it's not a guess, it's in Scripture. But so God is asking him to leave his lifestyle, to leave his comfort, to leave where he grew up, to leave any sort of wealth he had. There wasn't e-banking back then. Like, you can't check your balance on your phone and then charge it with, I don't know what, Venmo or whatever payments you use these days when you pay with your phone. He didn't have that, right? He had to leave it. He only could take what he could carry, right? Later, we would find out that there was tons of cattle. There was a lifestyle. There was provisions, right? And he was essentially sacrificing or being willing to give up most everything for that yes to God. For the idea that God says, leave that and I will show you the land that I'm taking you to. And so first, the first filter of how we react to God's proposals is saying yes to God always costs something. saying yes to God always costs something. And you might say, well, I mean, if if I actually gain a life or gain a thing from that yes that is greater than what I had, it still costs something. So even when you think it doesn't cost something, it still costs something because it costs that lifestyle. You saying yes to God and entering into the life that he desires for you, you can either go the Genesis 3 route where you say, okay, God, I got it from here, right? Or you can say, all right, God, I give it to you then. Like, you've led me to this place, and so it costs you giving up even that. Being like, here, God, I got it. You got it. I don't got it. You got it, right? So saying yes to God always costs something. Does that make sense? It always costs something in our life. And we enter into this idea of even with this idea of Abraham leaving everything behind. He goes from a mansion in his father's household to a tent on a hillside, right? Genesis 12:8. From there he went towards the hills east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built an altar to the Lord and called on his name. Now, there's so much stuff in here. Like he actually, before he established anything, he built an altar to worship God. That's pretty cool. Like, I don't think that's the route I would go. I'd be like, man, I gotta get my food. I mean, he's basically homesteading, right? So, but he does that. And church, I want to tell you something. This oftentimes, in this circumstance, and him leaving everything and then kind of going aimlessly into the land by God's lead. Not aimlessly because he's following God. Oftentimes, if we wouldn't have even, let me figure out how to word this right, because I don't want to make up a word, because I do that all too often. If we knew what the outcome would be, do you think you'd say yes? Like the times that I've said yes to God, if I knew what the outcome was, I don't know at the time I would actually say yes to that, right? Now, we don't even know. It's crazy. I was trying to think about man, how can I think of a story of a time where I said no to God? But here's the deal with that. We don't know what we're missing out on oftentimes. We can't measure. I mean, I can tell you, I'm going to stand up here, I'm going to share a couple things with you about some yeses that I'm making in my life and how I would and wouldn't have done it in time, but I guarantee you I've missed thousands of yeses, hundreds of yeses in my life where I said no to God, and then I just don't even know what I missed out on when it comes to that. But if I tell you a quick story, if I would have known now about the original yes I made back in 2017, 2018 to become a foster family. If I would have known, if you would have given me the list of everything that we had gone through and since then, I guarantee you back then I would have said no. I would have. And even though the heart of my wife and my kids is amazing and they would have been like, oh, we'll still do it, I would have been strong enough to be like, nah. I'm not signing up for that, right? And specifically with Charlotte and Josiah, if I would have known there was going to be death and mourning and goodbyes as they went back with mom and all the heartache and the pain, even before this current season we're in, I don't think I would have said yes back then. But it's different when we walk through it and we see the growth and we see what's come of it and we see the possibilities and we get a glimpse of the hope. And the unfair reality and the process and cost doesn't actually seem like that big of a deal anymore. Because it trusted and God led and he didn't tell us exactly what it was going to look like. And the same thing is true here with Abraham. He doesn't know where God's leading him. He knows that he's called to leave. Again, he goes from mansion to tent. He goes from feasting to famine. Verse 10 says that there was a famine that fell over the land. And this isn't like your COVID 2020 run out of toilet paper. Like, I mean, we got a picture here. Like, do you remember when the shelves of the grocery store were just empty? Do you remember that? Like, I mean, that was inconvenient, but there was plenty of food in my pantry and in my fridge. And then, like, the shelves were stocked within a couple days, minus the toilet paper. But this was like famine, like, I might lose my wife. I might die. A famine fell over the land while he was homesteading and didn't have access to refrigeration, grocery stores, Amazon delivery, grocery delivery, Instacart, none of that stuff, right? He had what he could carry and what he could get off the land, right? And I wonder at what point Abraham says, what did I do wrong? Like where I was, and God asked me to do something, and I said yes, and in that yes, this is where I'm at. And I don't know about you, but this is the way my mind works, and you might relate to my crazy mind or not, but I wonder when Abraham started asking the question, like, what did I do wrong? What did I do to get me to where I'm at? God, what did I do to you for you to abandon me, for you to leave me? Like, you're not even here. Famine, tent, base of a mountain, homesteading, like, God, what did I mess up? When in actuality, that wasn't the case at all. Like, Abraham didn't even have a son at this point to, like, make this great nation that God was promising. And I'm sure if he's like me at all, his mind was like, what did I mess up? How did I mess up to get me where I'm at right now? Yes to God costs something. And as I recalled the many, many, many stories in the Bible, and probably you can recall the stories in your life where you said yes specifically to God. Well, scratch that. How many times in the Bible or in your life did you say yes to God and like it was like the red carpet was rolled out and you lived happily ever after? Right? I mean, that's kind of funny, right? Oftentimes, I mean, my yes to God to do this was pretty crazy, and it wasn't like the most fairy tale-ish tales in my life, right? Or yes to, like I've already depicted, but you probably got stories in your life. Oh, and this Bible's full of stories where people said yes to God, and it wasn't fairy tales and flowery meadows. It was like, it was like tension and growth and trials and learning and growing again and loss and pain and refining, right? Those are the stories of God as he works us through what he desires for each one of us. In our life, God continues to show us that the decision to move 3 years ago into the house that we're currently in, God knew that we would need the space for these new kids. Like I can't even, it's obvious now. At the other point, I was like, I like the house. Right now, I'm like, like he just mapped it out, right? But he didn't tell me that, like, probably some of the hardest times in my marriage would also be in that season, with us going through the pain and hurt in our family and that kind of, sorry. I didn't mean like, I meant like family, marriage. Heather and I are good, all right? We're good. We've had our plenty of struggles. We're good now. Okay, we're good now. But you know what I mean? He wouldn't tell me that the hardest part, I know how that sounded when I said it. I was like, maybe I am in trouble. I don't even know when I'm in trouble. Marriage is hard. Costs a lot, right? And here's the deal. When it comes to our yeses, they're not one-offs. We say yes, and then it leads to a second yes, and a third yes, and a fourth yes. And if we go by kind of what happens when we say yes to God, those other yeses actually sometimes even get a little harder to say, harder to follow, harder to lead into. It's not a single yes that's met with opportunity. it's a second yes and a fourth yes that isn't easier, right? And that's what builds that idea of trust in God. That's what builds on that trust in faithfulness, right? And to follow him and to gain an understanding of God. In the book of Hebrews, there's a list in Hebrews 11 of what's called the Hall of Faith. These are people who are faithful, and because of their faith, this happened. It says it, I don't know how many specifically are in there, but there's quite a few in there. But nestled in that Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11 is Hebrews 11:6, and it says, "And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him." And that's the faith that we build when we say yes. And even though it's tough and we know the road ahead is a little bit hard, we say yes again. And he leads us into another yes. And he leads us into another opportunity. And along that way, we build faith and trust and understanding in God and who he is and what he desires for us, right? We're building on that faithfulness and trust when we say yes to God. And so, church, I ask you this morning, what is the yes that you're being asked? What is it literally that God is asking you to lay down in front of him, and he wants you to say yes to it? He wants you to get on board with it. What area is he asking you to trust him more in? Maybe it's in your workplace, where you spend a good majority of the chunk of your time in your faithfulness in living or even sharing the gospel out in your workplace. Being bold in your faith. Maybe it's in your family and leading them in and through a relationship with Christ. Maybe it's in your marriage, where he's asking you to do things and connect with your spouse in a way that maybe you haven't. Maybe it's in your kids and the raising them and the uncertainty and craziness that entails. He's asking you to trust him. Maybe it's in you showing them, your family, your friends, the faithfulness that God has displayed in your life. It kind of led me to this idea in when we are addressing a lot of these questions in our life. Why do we negotiate with God? Like, why would we think that negotiating would like get us anywhere with him? Like, if I say yes, God, if I say yes, then you will obviously do this, right? It will obviously end in this outcome. It will, I'll say yes, but it has to go this way. That is, in essence, the Genesis 3 idea that we're talking about. Like if I say yes, then I want to go this route because I think this is the route that's best for me. Right? We do that. I don't know. Side note. Anyways, I was like, man, I got to really not negotiate with God. Because he ultimately knows what's best for us. Having conversation with him about him, great. God, like, this is what I think. What do you think? You know, your way, not my way. But I just want you to know my way. Like, maybe those conversations are great with him, and he's going to lead us into that idea of where he wants is where we need to go. Maybe he's asking you to give in a certain way because he knows that you've built that up, that idea of monetary value and money, like that's what you've accomplished. Maybe he's asking you to serve or start a group or be a part of a group because he knows that you've uttered the words far too long as an excuse that, I'm just too busy, I don't have time. When I think it was a few weeks ago, I said, well, man, if Jesus needed a group of guys to hang out with him, like, why would we think we don't, right? I don't have time for that. I don't have time for community that you've designed and that you desire for me. Maybe it's to share your faith at your kids' school. Maybe it's, and you might know, maybe it's to forgive somebody that you just haven't been able to forgive. And he's made it pretty clear, man, I think this is the way forward in this situation. And you continue to say, no. If you only knew God. He knows, right? Maybe for you it's stepping into a relationship and trusting him in that. Or maybe it's stepping out of a relationship. One that you know hasn't been healthy or that hasn't actually been where God has desired for you. Stepping away from something, giving up something. Because he knows that the comfort of where you're at is holding you back. And these are the things, and maybe these are the things that you've never told anybody, but you know that kind of God's leading you into, or maybe you've just told one or two people because you don't want to be held accountable to that. But those are the areas that God's asking you to say yes and to trust him in. And he's met with. And maybe your response is, man, I do that, but it better not cost me my weekends, or it better not cost me a messy house or people coming over. It better not cost me my comfort. It better not put me in a position of responsibility or leadership. Better not cost me my hobby and the thing that I really love to do. It better not cost me my current lifestyle. It comes back to the idea that everything costs something, and nothing's free. In church, we didn't even get to this idea, and you probably thought, man, if we go into Genesis 12 and talk about Abraham, we're for sure going to talk about how Abraham walked up the mountain ready to kill his son on the altar, sacrifice. We're out of time, so we can't go there. But here's the deal. Because of the faithfulness that Abraham had established in the beginning, where God asked him, leave all these things and go, and then along the way, he trusted him over and over with his yeses, and he had built this rapport, and he had built this faithfulness and trust in God, that when it came to something like this Abraham and Isaac thing, and you can read it, there's tons of people smarter than me out there that have great definitions of that. But because of the faithfulness of God and Abraham's relationship, when it came to that moment, Abraham trusted that God was going to provide, that God was in control, and that God was going to actually lead him into the best way forward. I happen to believe that Abraham kind of knew that God wasn't going to actually have him sacrifice his son. But because of that faithfulness, Abraham trusted him. Abraham, over and over in his life, obeyed the unexpected commands of God, and he trusted God's promise because he knew over and over that God was trustworthy. So what are the yeses in your life that 10 years from now, you'll look back and be like, that established some serious trust that I had in God, and I allowed him to work? Can you imagine Isaac? Isaac is Abraham's son who Abraham took up the mountain. Can you imagine the faithfulness that Isaac started with? The story that his dad would tell him about all that he did to get him to the point where at the mountain he was going to kill him. And Isaac's like, I got goosebumps. I want to trust that God. God provided. And for us today, and I said it I think last week, for us, our where we're at right now is we're foundationally built on the yeses of other people. The yeses that 10 years ago somebody said, and because of that, or in our case 12, 13 years ago, specifically for this church, we're here now. And we're building the yeses of other people in our lives. When we say yes to God, that allows others to live in those yeses and those promises and the trustworthiness. I hope that I've passed down enough of God's faithfulness in my life that when Colby leaves for school, he'll cash in on that in an e-bank kind of manner. Like, I remember I lived a life where I saw my dad be faithful to God. Even when I messed up. Even when I didn't get it right. And so for us today, as we are faced with yeses in our lives, opportunities that God, I can only trust that He's laid things on your heart. I've gave plenty of explanations, and all my examples were from my life. I hope you can relate to even just a few of them and what God's asking you to do in forgiveness or trusting or abundance or whatever it may be. Whatever it is that He's laid on your heart, my hope is that you say yes to Him. And because of your yes, that strengthens the foundation of God's work in this church and in the life of my family, in the Blankenhorns, in the Morels, and the Warlines. Because of our faithfulness in seeing God be trustworthy in the things that He's done. Amen? Amen. I'll invite the band to come forward. I'm going to pray over us. Or the two people. It's not a band. Oh, I guess it's a band. Lord, you have been incredibly faithful. I can say that true about my life and the lives that are in this room, Lord. Thank you for the glimpse of your faithfulness and your trustworthiness that is represented in this room. I am so thankful, Lord, that is where we stand right now, together. And so, Lord, I pray for my brothers and sisters and for myself that as we kind of step into whatever this next season of life is, that we step one foot firmly on the yeses and faithfulness of who you are and what you've done, and one foot onto the next yes that you have for us in our life. The next thing you desire for us, Lord. And so I pray that over my brothers and sisters right now, Lord, as we close with these last two songs. May our hearts and minds be led into the life that you desire for us, Lord, and the way that you want to work, Lord. We want to be about that and your faithfulness, Lord. We pray this in your name. Amen. Amen.